It was just another long day for the delivery guy, the kind of day when the city felt too loud, the air too heavy, and every traffic light seemed to turn red just to slow him down. He balanced 2 large food bags on his old scooter, weaving through the crowded streets, hoping he could finish his deliveries before sunset. His name was Ethan Alvarez, though hardly anyone ever remembered it. To most customers, he was just the delivery guy. Sometimes they greeted him politely, other times they barely looked at him, but Ethan didn't complain. He just smiled, handed over the food, said thank you, and left quietly. He didn't mind the silence. In fact, he preferred it. Silence had become his companion over the years. As he drove through the city, he often listened to soft violin music through his small earphones. It was the one thing that reminded him who he used to be, because once upon a time Ethan wasn't just another delivery man riding through traffic. He was a musician, a violinist who dreamed of playing on big stages. But dreams, he had learned, don't always survive reality. Years ago, when he was younger, Ethan studied music at a conservatory. He spent countless nights practicing until his fingers hurt. He loved the violin more than anything in the world. The sound of it felt like home to him, warm, gentle, and alive. He believed music could tell stories that words could never express. He had talent, too. His teachers said he had a natural ear, that rare ability to make a violin sing. He even won a small local competition once, and for a short time he thought his life was finally moving in the right direction. But then, everything changed. His father got sick and medical bills began piling up. Ethan had no choice but to leave his music school and take any job he could find. He promised himself it was only temporary, just until things got better. But weeks turned into months and months turned into years. His violin stayed packed in a dusty case under his bed. Now, 5 years later, Ethan's days were filled not with melodies but with the sound of engines, traffic horns, and phone notifications. He had learned every shortcut in the city, every kind of customer, every trick to avoid getting a bad rating. Still, sometimes when he parked his scooter for a quick break, he would take out his old violin bow, not the violin, just the bow, and run his fingers over it gently. The wood felt smooth but tired, like it had been waiting too long. He missed music more than he could ever admit. That afternoon, the sun hung low over the city, casting long golden shadows on the road. Ethan had just finished his 5th delivery of the day and was on his way to a big hotel downtown. It was one of those fancy places with glass walls, shining floors, and people who always seemed to be in a hurry. He parked his scooter near the back entrance, checked the delivery app, and saw the order details: 10 boxes of gourmet lunch for a corporate event. He sighed, straightened his jacket, and walked inside carrying the heavy bags. The lobby was filled with the soft hum of people talking, the clinking of cups, and the faint sound of jazz music playing somewhere in the background. Ethan quietly made his way to the reception desk. "Delivery for Room Hall B, corporate event," he said politely. The receptionist barely looked up from her screen and waved him toward the elevator. "Upstairs, 2nd floor. Follow the sign to the conference room," she said in a flat voice. Ethan nodded. He was used to that kind of tone. When he reached the conference hall, he saw a group of people standing near the buffet table, laughing and talking. They were all dressed in suits and shiny shoes. He set the food down carefully and began arranging the boxes on the counter. "Hey, buddy," one man called out, half laughing. "You got the drinks too?" Ethan smiled politely. "No, sir, just the meals." The man chuckled and turned to his friends. "Well, I hope the delivery guy can play the violin too in case the entertainment doesn't show up," he joked. The group laughed. Ethan forced a smile. He'd heard jokes like that before. People often joked about delivery guys, their jobs, their clothes, their bikes. Most of the time he ignored it, but this one felt different, because if only they knew, he could play the violin. He had once played in front of hundreds of people, not as a background performer, but as the lead soloist. He still remembered the warmth of the lights, the quiet before the first note, the way the audience held their breath as the bow touched the strings. But now, here he was, standing in a hotel room wearing a faded delivery jacket, holding paper boxes instead of a violin. He kept his head down and continued arranging the food. One of the women at the table looked at him curiously. "You seem very calm," she said kindly. "Do you do this full time?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied softly. It helps me pay the bills. She nodded, then went back to her conversation. Ethan finished his setup, took out his phone to confirm the delivery, and waited for someone to sign. The same man who had made the joke earlier scribbled his name on the screen. All right, all good. You can go now, maestro, he said with a smirk. Ethan smiled faintly, nodded and turned to leave. But as he walked toward the door, something caught his attention. A violin case was resting on one of the chairs near the stage. It looked expensive, dark brown wood with gold latches. Ethan's eyes froze for a second. His hands instinctively twitched. He hadn't touched a violin in years, but just seeing that case brought back a flood of memories. The smell of rosin, the sound of strings tuning before a concert, the feeling of holding something that was both delicate and powerful. He didn't mean to stare, but he couldn't help it. One of the men noticed. Oh, this? He said, pointing to the violin case. We were supposed to have a live performer tonight for the event. Some violin guy from the orchestra, but he canceled last minute. Ethan nodded politely. That's unfortunate. Yeah, the man continued, shrugging. Anyway, we were joking that maybe you could fill in for him. The group chuckled again. Ethan smiled weakly and said nothing. He turned to leave, but just then, a voice came from the doorway. Ethan? Is that you? He froze. He knew that voice. It was Mr. Daniels, the hotel's event manager, a man who had once been a volunteer coordinator at the conservatory Ethan attended years ago. Ethan turned slowly. Oh, Mr. Daniels, it's been a long time. Daniels squinted for a moment, then his eyes widened. You're the same Ethan who played Meditation from Thais at the graduation concert, aren't you? Ethan smiled awkwardly. Yes, sir. That was me. Long time ago. The group of business guests exchanged surprised glances. The same man who had joked earlier raised an eyebrow. Wait, you play violin? Ethan nodded modestly. I used to. The woman from before looked interested. Used to? Why'd you stop? Ethan hesitated, his eyes lowering. Life happened, he said softly. Mr. Daniels looked thoughtful. Then he gestured toward the violin case on the chair. You know, the violin is canceled and the event hasn't started yet. Why don't you play something for them? For old time's sake, Ethan's heart skipped. Oh, I don't think that's a good idea, sir, he said quickly. I haven't played in years, but Daniel smiled gently. Music doesn't leave you, Ethan. Once it's in you, it stays. The guests were watching now, half curious, half amused. The man who had mocked him folded his arms. Yeah, why not? Let's see what the delivery guy can do, he said with a grin. Ethan's palms grew sweaty. He wanted to refuse, but something deep inside him, something that had been silent for years, stirred. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was longing. He took a deep breath and looked at the violin case again. For the first time in years, he wanted to hold one again, and he didn't even realize that. In that moment, his life was about to change forever. Ethan stood there quietly, his eyes fixed on the violin case resting on the chair. The room had gone silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft clinking of glasses from the far end of the hall. Everyone was watching him now, curious, doubtful, even a little amused. He could feel the weight of their eyes. A part of him wanted to just smile, nod politely, and leave. After all, he was only there to drop off food. He wasn't supposed to be a part of their event. But another part of him, a quiet, hidden part, wanted to say yes. It had been years since he'd touched a violin. Years since he'd felt that vibration through his fingers. That sound that once defined who he was. The thought scared him and comforted him at the same time. Mr. Daniels, the hotel manager, stepped closer. Ethan, he said softly, don't worry about it being perfect. Just play something. For yourself. The man who had made fun of him earlier laughed. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? It'll be fun. Ethan gave a nervous smile, trying to hide his unease. He looked down at his worn-out delivery jacket, his tired shoes, and then back at the shiny violin case. The contrast almost made him laugh. What would a guy like him be doing here in a hall full of expensive suits and silk dresses, holding a violin? Still, something inside whispered, do it. So he nodded slowly. All right, he said quietly. A few people clapped softly, mostly out of curiosity. Daniels handed him the violin case. Ethan opened it carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid it might disappear if he blinked too long. Inside lay a beautiful instrument, polished, elegant, and far more expensive than any he had ever owned. The wood glowed warmly under the soft lights. His hands trembled as he lifted it out. It felt heavier than he remembered, not in weight but in emotion. He checked the bow, ran the horsehair gently against his palm, and tightened it just a bit. His movements were slow but deliberate. The muscle memory was still there, sleeping under the surface, waiting to wake up. The people around him had gathered now, some holding their phones up, ready to record. A few chuckled quietly, expecting this to be awkward or funny. Ethan heard them, but he tried not to care. He rested the violin on his shoulder, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. For a few seconds, the world seemed to fade away, and the noise, the judgment, the hotel lights, then everything. All that remained was him and the instrument. He drew the bow across the strings. The first note cracked slightly. It wasn't perfect, but the second note, it sang. The sound was soft, trembling, but alive. It filled the air, gentle at first, then stronger, flowing through the hall like a breath of wind. Conversation stopped. Laughter faded. The air seemed to grow still. He began to play Meditation from Thais, the same piece he had performed at his conservatory graduation years ago. It was the only piece he still remembered by heart, the one that had always felt closest to his soul. As the melody rose and fell, Ethan forgot where he was. He forgot about the food boxes, the delivery app, the bills waiting at home. In those few moments, he wasn't the delivery guy anymore. He was just a man who loved music. His fingers moved gracefully, naturally. Every note carried a memory. The nights of practice, his father's proud smile, the dreams he once had. The music wasn't loud or flashy. It was simple, honest, and full of feeling. When he played the softer passages, the room seemed to breathe with him. And when the music swelled, it felt like something powerful had been set free, something that had been buried inside him for far too long. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the man who had laughed at him earlier stood frozen, his expression slowly changing from amusement to disbelief. Ethan played with his eyes closed until the final note faded into silence. The bow hovered in the air for a second before he gently lowered it. For a heartbeat, the room was completely still. Then your applause. It started softly, then grew louder until the whole hall echoed with clapping and cheers. Some people even stood up. The woman from earlier wiped a tear from her eye. Mr. Daniels smiled proudly, his eyes shining. "I told you," he said quietly. "Music never leaves you." Ethan felt a rush of emotions he couldn't quite explain. Relief, pride, disbelief. He hadn't played for an audience in years, and he had forgotten how it felt to be seen like that. He bowed his head slightly, smiling shyly. "Thank you," he murmured. The man who had mocked him walked forward, still clapping. I didn't expect that," he admitted. "You're really good." Ethan gave a modest shrug. "I used to play," he said simply. The man chuckled awkwardly, embarrassed. "Well, you should still play. That was... wow." Ethan smiled faintly, appreciating the sincerity in his voice. The guests began to ask questions: how long he'd been playing, where he learned, why he stopped. He answered a few politely, but mostly he just stood there, still processing what had just happened. Someone recorded the entire thing on their phone and uploaded it online almost instantly. They titled the clip, "Delivery Guy Shocks Everyone by Playing the Violin Like a Pro." Ethan didn't even know about it yet. He was too lost in the moment, still holding the violin gently, as if afraid it might vanish if he let go. After a few minutes, Mr. Daniels approached him again. "You know," he said, "we have another event tomorrow night. Would you consider performing officially? I could pay you, of course." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know, sir. I don't even have my own violin anymore." Daniels smiled. "Then use ours. You belong on that stage, not just running deliveries." Ethan looked down, unsure how to respond. His heart wanted to say yes immediately, but his mind was filled with doubts, his job, his bills, his routine. Could he really go back to that old dream? He gave a small, uncertain smile. "I'll think about it," Daniels nodded. "That's all I ask." When the event ended, Ethan carefully placed the violin back in its case. He thanked everyone quietly, picked up his delivery bag, and left through the same doors he came in. Outside, the evening air felt cool and calm. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement as he started his scooter. But something felt different this time. As he rode through the streets, He noticed people laughing, walking, living their normal lives. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a spark inside him, the same spark that once pushed him to practice for hours, to dream of concert halls and applause. He stopped at a red light and caught his reflection in the scooter mirror. For the first time in years, he smiled at himself, not the tired delivery worker, but the musician still living inside him. When he got home, he placed his food bag on the counter and went straight to his room. He pulled out the old violin case from under his bed. Dust covered it, the latch slightly rusted. He opened it slowly. Inside was his old violin, worn, scratched, and out of tune, but still his. He picked it up, tightened the bow, and tried a few notes. They squeaked at first, but as he kept playing, the sound grew warmer. The walls of his small apartment echoed softly with the tune he had played earlier. And though no one was there to listen, Ethan smiled. Because tonight, for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like just a delivery guy. He felt like himself again. That night, Ethan hardly slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear the sound of the applause echoing in his mind. That wild, unexpected moment when the entire room had clapped just for him. He wasn't used to it anymore. For so long he had been invisible, moving through life like a shadow. But that night, people saw him again. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his old violin resting on the table beside him. He had cleaned it earlier, wiping away years of dust and guilt. The strings were still a little rough, the bridge slightly tilted, but it was playable. He smiled at it like an old friend he had finally found again. The next morning, as he got ready for work, his phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. He frowned. It wasn't normal for him to get so many messages. When he opened his delivery app, everything looked fine. But then he noticed a message from a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. "Bro, you're all over the internet." Ethan blinked. "What?" He clicked the link his friend sent. It opened a video, shaky footage of him standing in the hotel hall holding the violin. The title read, "Delivery Guy Surprises Everyone with Beautiful Violin Performance." The video had over 50,000 views, and it had only been uploaded 12 hours ago. He watched the clip in disbelief. There he was, looking nervous at first, then slowly letting the music take over. The camera panned across the audience. Stunned faces, teary eyes, people recording with their phones. The comments below were full of kindness and surprise. "This man has more talent than most professionals. What a beautiful moment. Never judge someone by their job. I want to find this guy and hear him play again." Ethan scrolled through hundreds of comments, his heart racing. He couldn't believe it. In one night, a small moment that wasn't even planned had turned into something bigger than him. At first, he didn't know how to feel. Part of him was proud, but another part was nervous. He had always been private about his past, and now strangers were suddenly talking about him online. As he read through the messages, another notification popped up. A call from Mr. Daniels, the hotel manager. "Ethan," Daniels said excitedly. "You've seen the video, right? It's everywhere." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, I just saw it this morning. I don't even know what to say." "Well, say yes to this," Daniels replied. "We have another event tonight, just like I mentioned. Everyone's been asking about you. The guests want you to perform again, and officially this time." Ethan hesitated. I don't know, sir. I have my delivery shifts. I can't just— I'll take care of that," Daniels interrupted kindly. "You deserve this chance, Ethan. You made people feel something last night. That's rare. Don't let it go." There was a long pause. Ethan stared at his old violin case lying on the bed. "All right," he said finally, his voice calm but certain. "I'll do it." That evening, Ethan arrived at the hotel again, this time not with a delivery bag, but with his violin in hand. The staff greeted him with warm smiles and nods. Some even recognized him from the viral video. The hall looked even brighter this time. Elegant decorations, soft lights, and a small stage set up near the center. Daniels greeted him with a firm handshake. "Good to see you again, Maestro." Ethan laughed softly. "I don't know about Maestro, but it's good to be here." As he warmed up backstage, his hands trembled slightly. It wasn't fear, it was excitement. He had forgotten what that felt like. When it was time, Daniels took the microphone and introduced him to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome someone truly special. The man who reminded us never to judge by appearances, and whose music touched all our hearts last night. Mr. Ethan Alvarez." Applause filled the hall as Ethan walked onto the stage. This time, he wasn't wearing his delivery jacket. He had borrowed a simple black shirt and trousers from the hotel staff. Nothing fancy, but for him it felt like armor. He adjusted the microphone slightly and smiled shyly at the crowd. "I didn't plan for any of this," he began softly. "I'm just someone who loves music, and I'm grateful you're here to listen." Then he lifted his violin. The first note echoed beautifully through the hall, clear, strong, and full of emotion. This time he didn't hold back. He played Ave Maria, a piece he used to play for his father when he was sick. The music rose and fell like a heartbeat. Every note carried a story of love, struggle, and hope. The audience listened silently, some closing their eyes, others wiping away quiet tears. Even the waiters standing at the back stopped to listen. When the last note faded, the room stayed still for a few seconds. That beautiful kind of silence that only real music can create. Then applause erupted again. Ethan smiled deeply, bowing his head. It wasn't just applause this time. It felt like forgiveness, from life, from himself, from all the years he'd spent hiding. After the performance, people came to shake his hand and take photos with him. Several guests asked for his contact information, saying they wanted to invite him to future events. As he packed up his violin later that night, Daniels approached him again. "You were incredible, Ethan. I meant what I said. You belong in music, not behind a delivery bag." Ethan nodded, smiling gratefully. "Thank you, sir. But honestly, I'm just happy I got to play again." Daniels patted him on the shoulder. "Something tells me this is just the beginning." He was right. Over the next few days, the video kept spreading. News pages picked it up. Local TV stations started running short clips of him. One reporter even called him the humble violinist. Ethan's phone didn't stop buzzing. Interviews, invitations, even people offering him small gigs at weddings and restaurants. He didn't know how to handle it all. At first, he was overwhelmed. But slowly, he began to accept that maybe, just maybe, the world was giving him a second chance. One afternoon, as he was finishing a delivery near a school, he saw a group of kids practicing violin through a classroom window. Their teacher recognized him from the news and invited him inside. "Kids," she said, smiling. "This is the man I told you about, the delivery driver who played the violin and became famous overnight." The children gasped in excitement. "Can you play something for us?" one of them asked eagerly. Ethan laughed softly. "Of course." He took out his violin and played a short, cheerful tune. The kids clapped and laughed. One little girl whispered, "I want to play like you when I grow up." Ethan's eyes softened. "You can," he said gently. "Never stop practicing no matter how hard life gets. Music will always wait for you." As he walked out of the classroom, the teacher stopped him. "You know," she said kindly, "we could use someone like you here to teach. The kids would love it." Ethan smiled. "Maybe someday." That night, as he rode home, the city looked different to him, brighter somehow. He thought about everything that had happened in just a few days. One small act, one unexpected performance had changed everything. He parked his scooter near his apartment, took off his helmet, and looked up at the night sky. He could still hear the music in his head, his own music. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was running from something. He was moving toward something. He went inside, placed his violin carefully on the table, and sat beside it. His phone buzzed again. Another notification. Someone had commented on the viral video. "This man reminded me that real talent can come from anywhere." "Thank you for the music," Ethan smiled quietly. He didn't need fame or fortune. Just knowing his music had touched someone's heart was enough. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a journey that would take him further than he'd ever imagined. Because sometimes the people the world overlooks have the most beautiful stories to tell. The days that followed felt like a dream to Ethan. He still worked as a delivery guy during the day, but something had changed inside him. Every time he looked in the mirror before heading out, he didn't just see a tired man trying to make ends meet. He saw a musician, someone who had rediscovered a part of himself he thought was lost forever. Each delivery, each stoplight, each short break during the day felt lighter now. Music followed him everywhere, in his mind, in his heartbeat, in the rhythm of his scooter engine. One evening, as he was finishing his shift, he got a message from a number he didn't recognize. Hi, Ethan. This is from the City Cultural Center. We saw your performance online and would love to meet you regarding an upcoming music event. Please call us. He read the message 3 times just to be sure it was real. His heart started pounding. Could it be true? He called the number right away. A kind woman answered, introducing herself as the event coordinator. We're organizing a community concert next month, she said. We'd be honored if you could perform. The theme is Hidden Talents of the City. Your story fits perfectly. Ethan could barely find the words. I'd love to, he said finally. The woman smiled through the phone. Wonderful. We'll send you the details. Welcome aboard, Ethan. When the call ended, Ethan just sat there on his scooter staring into the city lights. A small tear rolled down his cheek, not out of sadness but from relief. After years of silence, music was finally calling him back. He decided he would prepare for it properly. Every night after work, he practiced. His small apartment became filled with music. Warm, shaky at first, but slowly growing stronger. The neighbors didn't complain. In fact, a few even left little notes at his door saying how beautiful it sounded. He fixed his old violin himself, cleaned the strings, polished the wood. He even started saving small portions of his delivery tips to buy new rosin and strings. It felt good to take care of something that meant so much to him again. But it wasn't easy. There were nights when his fingers cramped and old doubts crept in. Sometimes he wondered if people would still care, or if his first viral moment was just luck. Yet every time he thought about giving up, he remembered the faces of those kids at the school, their eyes full of wonder when he played. That memory was enough to keep him going. A few weeks later, the day of the concert finally came. The venue was a beautiful open-air stage in the park. Lanterns hung from the trees, soft lights glowed around the edges, and a large crowd slowly gathered. There were performers from all walks of life. Street dancers, poets, painters, and small local bands. Ethan arrived early, holding his violin close. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a clean white shirt and black trousers. He wasn't there to impress anyone, just to play. The event organizer greeted him warmly. Ethan, we're so glad you came. You'll be performing in the second half. Are you ready? He smiled nervously. I think so. As the evening went on, he watched the other performers with admiration. They were all ordinary people with extraordinary talent. It reminded him how many dreams live quietly inside people, waiting for a moment to be seen. When his turn came, the announcer took the stage. Up next, she said, is someone whose story has touched hearts across the country. A man who proved that talent and passion can't be hidden forever. Please welcome Ethan Alvarez. The audience clapped as he stepped onto the stage. He could feel the familiar flutter in his chest, nervous but excited. He adjusted the microphone, looked at the crowd, and took a deep breath. Good evening, everyone, he began softly. I'm not a professional performer. I'm just someone who loves music. For a long time, I stopped playing. Life got in the way, but I learned that music never really leaves you. It waits patiently until you're ready to listen again. The crowd was quiet, listening intently. He raised the violin to his shoulder and began to play. This time it was his own composition, something he had written late at night when the city was asleep. It didn't have a name, just feelings. Hope, pain, and gratitude, all mixed into one melody. The sound floated through the cool evening air, wrapping around the trees and reaching every corner of the park. The audience sat still, some with eyes closed, letting the music carry them away. In that moment, Ethan felt completely alive. He wasn't thinking about bills or work or the past. He was simply there, connected to every person listening. As he played the final note, the crowd rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the park. Some people even shouted his name. Ethan smiled shyly and bowed. His chest felt light, his eyes glistening. For years he had carried the weight of regret and silence, and now it felt like all of it had finally lifted. After the show, people came to talk to him, take pictures, and thank him for his music. A man in a dark blazer introduced himself as a music teacher from a local academy. Ethan, he said, shaking his hand, you have something rare, not just skill but soul. Would you ever consider teaching? We need someone like you to inspire the next generation. Ethan was speechless. Me, teach? The man smiled. Yes, you have a story these kids can learn from. Sometimes they need more than technique, and they need heart. Ethan didn't say yes right away. but the idea stuck in his mind for days after. When he went back to delivering food the next morning, he noticed how different everything felt. The same streets, the same buildings, but somehow the world seemed brighter. He stopped by a small park to rest and saw an elderly man playing harmonica for spare change. Ethan sat next to him and listened quietly for a while. When the man finished, Ethan smiled. "That was beautiful." The old man laughed softly. Just something to pass time. Not much use for music these days." Ethan shook his head. "Music always has a use. You never know who it might reach." The old man nodded slowly, understanding. "You're right, son." As Ethan got up to leave, he slipped a few bills into the man's cup and said, "Keep playing. Someone's always listening." Later that week, Ethan visited the music academy the man from the concert had mentioned. The building wasn't big or fancy, but it was full of sound. Violins, pianos, laughter. The moment he stepped inside, he felt that familiar warmth again. The director welcomed him and showed him around. "We'd love for you to start with beginner students," she said. "You don't need to be perfect, just patient." Ethan smiled. "I think I can do that." And so he began teaching a small group of children twice a week after his delivery shifts. The pay wasn't much, but it didn't matter. Seeing those kids struggle with the same first notes he once did filled him with joy. One day, a young boy looked up at him and said, "Sir, how did you get so good?" Ethan chuckled. "By failing many times," he said. "And by never giving up, even when life told me to." The boy grinned. "I'll do that too." Ethan patted his shoulder gently. "That's all that matters." Every class ended with him playing something simple for the kids, just to remind them why they were learning. Sometimes the parents stayed to listen, smiling proudly. Ethan would walk home afterward with his violin on his back, the sound of laughter still in his ears. The streets were the same, but his life was completely different. He wasn't just delivering food anymore. He was delivering hope. Through music, through example, through kindness. And though he didn't say it out loud, he often thought to himself, maybe this was the stage I was meant for all along. Life had begun to feel different for Ethan. He still woke up early for his delivery shifts, still navigated the crowded streets on his scooter, and still balanced orders and traffic. But the heaviness he had carried for years was gone. Music had returned to him, and with it a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Teaching at the music academy gave him a new rhythm. Twice a week, he guided children through their first shaky notes, their first nervous glances at the violin, and their first small successes. Every time a child learned a new song, Ethan felt the same joy he had felt when he first performed for an audience. It wasn't just joy, though. It was a quiet satisfaction, a feeling that he was making a difference in the lives of others, giving them what he had once been given, hope through music. One afternoon, after finishing his classes, Ethan headed back to the apartment he had been living in for years. On the way, he noticed a familiar scene, a young boy practicing violin under a tree in the park, struggling but determined. Ethan stopped to watch. "Hey," he said gently, "you're doing great. Don't worry if the notes sound messy at first." The boy looked up and grinned. "You're the delivery guy who played the violin." Ethan chuckled. "That's me. And you know what? Anyone can play. You just have to keep trying." The boy nodded seriously, and Ethan felt a small warmth in his chest. Teaching, inspiring, guiding, it wasn't just about music. It was about showing people that their talents and dreams mattered, even if the world sometimes overlooked them. A few days later, another opportunity came knocking. A popular local newspaper contacted him for an interview. They wanted to tell the full story, not just the viral video, but his journey from struggling delivery driver to violinist and teacher. Ethan hesitated at first. He wasn't used to sharing his personal life, but he remembered why he played the violin, to connect, to tell stories, to touch people's hearts. And now it was time to share his story. During the interview, he spoke honestly about the years he had put aside music, the struggles he had faced, and the moment that changed everything. "Sometimes," he said softly, "life forces you to take a different path, but it doesn't mean you've lost who you are. Talent, dreams, and passion, they stay with you, and one day, if you're lucky, they find a way back." The article went viral in its own way. People reached out, inspired by his journey, sharing their own stories of hidden talents and second chances. The world, which had once barely noticed him, now seemed to care. Then came another surprise. A local charity, having seen his viral video, asked him to perform at their annual gala. The event aimed to raise money for children who couldn't afford music lessons. The organizers thought Ethan's story was perfect, someone who understood struggle and the joy of rediscovering music. Ethan agreed. On the night of the gala, he walked onto the stage with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. But as soon as he lifted his violin, the nervousness melted away. He played a medley of songs, and some classical, some his own compositions, each note carrying a lifetime of emotion. Tears glistened in the eyes of some audience members, and he noticed small children staring wide-eyed, imagining themselves one day holding a violin just like his. After the performance, the applause was thunderous. People lined up to shake his hand, to thank him for sharing his music and story. For the first time, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just performing, he was inspiring. Weeks turned into months. Invitations to perform came more frequently, both small and large. He played at schools, local concerts, and charity events, and yet he never stopped his delivery work. It grounded him. It reminded him of where he had come from. One quiet afternoon, he delivered food to a small cafe downtown. The barista looked up from the counter and said, "Hey, aren't you that violinist? The delivery guy?" Ethan smiled softly. "Yes, that's me," the barista grinned. "I saw your video. You were amazing. People keep talking about it." Ethan nodded humbly. "Thank you. I just hope it inspires someone, that's all." Later, as he walked back to his scooter, he noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench, struggling to adjust her bag. He went over and helped her. She smiled warmly. "You remind me of my grandson," she said. "Keep doing what you do. The world needs it." Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. Life had given him small reminders like this, moments of connection that made all the struggles worthwhile. Then came the biggest surprise of all. One morning, a letter arrived for him at the music academy. It was an invitation to perform at a prestigious city concert alongside professional musicians he had once admired from afar. He stared at the envelope in disbelief. This was more than he had ever imagined. When he told Daniels, the hotel manager, he laughed softly. "See? I told you. Life has a funny way of noticing talent when you least expect it." Ethan smiled. "I never thought I'd get here. Not after all those years." Daniels shook his head. "It's not about what you thought. It's about what you did. You never gave up on your music even when it seemed impossible." The concert arrived. Ethan stepped onto the grand stage, the lights bright, the audience filled with people he had admired for years. He lifted his violin, and as he drew the first note, memories flooded back, and the struggles, the silence, the viral video, the kids he taught, the streets he rode his scooter on. He played with every bit of emotion he had, every story he carried. The music was no longer just sound. It was a narrative of his life, a testament to resilience and hope. When the final note lingered in the air, the audience erupted in applause. Standing ovation after standing ovation, people who had once doubted him now looked at him with respect, admiration, and awe. He stepped off the stage later, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. Backstage, a young boy from one of his classes ran up to him. "Sir," the boy said, eyes shining, "you're amazing. One day I want to play like you." Ethan knelt down and smiled. "You can. Never stop trying, no matter what." And as he walked home that night, carrying his violin case carefully, he realized something important. Life hadn't just given him a second chance at music. It had given him a chance to inspire, to connect, and to remind people that everyone has hidden talents, waiting for the right moment to shine. The delivery guy who once went unnoticed, laughed at and doubted by strangers, had found his place, not just on the stage, but in the hearts of those who had listened, believed, and been moved by his music. And though he still delivered food, he no longer felt invisible. He had discovered that sometimes the most unexpected people carry the most extraordinary stories. Ethan Alvarez, the delivery guy, had become something more, a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that talent doesn't belong to the rich or famous, and that anyone, anywhere, could shine if given the chance. As he placed his violin carefully on the table that night, he whispered softly to himself, "Thank you, life, for letting me play again." And somewhere deep inside he knew, This was only the beginning.